Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. We've got Yahoo Sports contributing writer Tom Haberstroh joining us today to talk all things NBA Finals and so much more. Let's huddle up and get right into it. We are kicking off this week with Pomp's Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. First up, Major League Baseball announced last week that it will make a significant investment in the new Athletes Unlimited Softball League, or AUSL for short. Financial terms of the deal were not announced, but Sportico reported that MLB will be investing at least $10 million in AUSL. And as part of the deal, MLB will work with AUSL on joint sales and marketing efforts, promote the league on MLB broadcast and social media platforms, and select AUSL games will air on MLB Network and MLB TV. Now, this is Major League Baseball's first major partnership with a women's sports league. The AUSL, which is part of the Athletes Unlimited brand, founded by John Petrikoff and Jonathan Soros in 2020, will launch its inaugural season this Saturday. AUSL will feature 4 teams, a 24-game schedule, and an All-Star Cup. AUSL teams will also play games in 12 cities across the U.S. before switching to a city-based team schedule in 2026, and games will air on ESPN networks for its debut season. Next up, sports stocks finally rebounded for their first positive month since January, according to a new report from Sportico. In May, Sportico's Sports Stock Index posted a 7% gain to finish the month at 1380. Sportico credited the index's rebound to ease fears on President Trump's tariff announcements, which was also seen on a broader level across the entire stock market. Now, Sportico's Sports Stock Index is a group of 40 stocks that leverage sports as a major driver for future business growth, including companies like Formula One, Sphere Entertainment, and Nike. And to be part of the index, the company's stock has to be traded in the U.S., offer sufficient daily trade volume, and have a market cap that is over $50 million. All told, 28 of the companies in the index were up in the month of May, with 13 rising over 10% each during that period. And many companies impacted by potential tariffs saw massive gains in May, including On Holdings at 24%, Aramark at 22%, Under Armour at 17%, and Nike at 7%. Last up, lottery ticket prices for the Masters tournament have increased for next year's tournament in 2026. Now, Augusta National Golf Club offers a lottery that gives fans the chance to buy tickets at discounted rates. Anyone can enter the lottery for free through the Masters website from now until June 20th, and winners will be notified in July to buy the cheaper tickets. However, you need a lot of luck, as lottery entrants only have a 0.55% chance of winning. And if you are lucky enough to win tickets for the 2026 Masters, you'll be paying a higher price than this year's tournament. Lottery tickets for practice rounds are up 25% to $125 each. Prices for the Par 3 contest are up 50% to $150 each. And daily passes for each of the 4 tournament rounds are up 14% to $160 each. But even with these price increases, lottery tickets for the Masters are still a bargain, as daily passes on the secondary market can cost 15 to 20 times more than face value. This week for the Deeper Dive, where I give you a play-by-play analysis of news in the sports world and its significance to your bottom line, we're talking about the enhanced games. One of the most fascinating and controversial developments in sports right now is the enhanced games. Imagine the Olympics, but instead of performance-enhancing drugs being banned, they're actually encouraged. And if you break a world record, you win $1 million. Founded by Australian entrepreneur Aaron D'Souza, the Enhanced Games is a privately funded competition that has raised millions from tech billionaires, including Peter Thiel. And by being privately funded, the event is free from government or Olympic Committee control. Now, the International Olympic Committee and the World Anti-Doping Agency have condemned the concept, calling it dangerous and irresponsible. But D'Souza argues the opposite, claiming that current sports rules place artificial limits on human potential, and that researching enhanced performance could lead to medical breakthroughs. Here's how the Enhanced Games will work. Athletes can choose to compete with or without enhancements. If they opt to use PEDs, these athletes must pass rigorous medical screening, and only drugs that are legally available in the U.S. via prescription are allowed. Athletes can then choose to manage their own PED regimen or join the Enhanced Games official clinical trial with a full medical staff. All athletes will be monitored by doctors and scientists throughout training and competition. Now, the first official competition is set for Memorial Day weekend 2026 in Las Vegas and will feature swimming, track and field, and weightlifting events. However, the Enhanced Games are already making some noise. Greek swimmer Christian Golomev broke the 50-meter freestyle world record during a closed trial event in April and collected the first $1 million prize from the Enhanced Games. And former Olympic swimmer James Magnussen looks nearly unrecognizable after just a few weeks of training on PEDs. But the true X factor here is that the Enhanced Games compensation model is drastically different than the Olympics. Unlike the Olympics, where medals come with little to no money, each Enhanced Games event will have a $500,000 prize pool with at least $250,000 given to the winner. And some athletes will even get appearance fees just for showing up. Now, competing in the enhanced games could result in a lifetime ban from international events, which is why many of the athletes are expected to be toward the end of their careers or recently retired. But the enhanced games are so controversial because they go against everything we've been taught about the use of PEDs in professional sports. Critics will say that PEDs undermine fair play and put athletes' health at risk, while supporters will argue that it's better to regulate PEDs openly and than have athletes experiment with drugs on their own. Now, I'm not here to tell you which side of the argument you should be on, but I would argue that this situation was self-inflicted, similar to how Live Golf was able to steal some of the PGA Tour's most popular players with a reduced schedule and guaranteed money. The Olympics' inability to provide proper governance and financial stability for their athletes is why the enhanced games ever came to life in the first place. We've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. With the NBA Finals coming up this week, I thought there'd be no better person to join the show than Yahoo Sports contributing writer Tom Haberstroh. Tom, thank you so much for joining the show. There are a lot of different ways we can take this conversation, but I want to just start with the two teams, and more specifically, how these two teams got there, right? We have the Thunder and the Pacers, and we've lived in this era for a while now where it feels like super teams have sort of dominated in big markets as a result, with teams in California, Boston, Miami, whatever it is over the last decade or two. But now we have the Thunder and the Pacers. You had an interesting tweet earlier this week talking about how this is the first time since I think 2007 where neither team in the finals played on Christmas Day. Talk to me just a little bit about how we got here with two small market teams in the NBA finals.
Well, the game is so much faster now, Joe. When you talk about the pace of the league, it makes it really difficult to build with older veterans. We think about the Miami Heat in 2011. You think about Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving, these kind of super teams with older veterans. Well, the game is about 10 possessions faster, 10 more possessions per game than we did in like the late 90s and early 2000s. And so what you're seeing is younger teams. This is going to be potentially the youngest NBA champion in the Oklahoma City Thunder that we've seen since 1977. And the Indiana Pacers like to play fast and up-tempo, led by a young star in Tyrese Halliburton. So the way that the league is trending now, the game is faster. I talked to Steve Kerr about this, who, of course, played with the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan and coached not just the Golden State Warriors, but also Team USA. And he thinks that this pace and space era with 5 shooters on the floor for each team and playing at a high pace, it lends itself to younger teams. And of course, Stephen Curry getting injured in this postseason, Damian Lillard tearing his Achilles, as well as Jason Tatum. We're just seeing the game really translate much better for younger teams that can run up and down the floor. And a lot of that is building through the draft and trading rather than adding in free agency. So teams like OKC and Indiana, small market teams, are taking advantage of this pace and space era by building through the draft and building on young teams. There is no player on this Oklahoma City Thunder team that is 31 years or older. And that is just something that is such an outlier of outliers in the NBA, title contention that we've seen over the last 2 decades.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you think other teams or contenders will be built the way the Thunder and Pacers are, right? Because the way I think about it is, like, there's so many injuries nowadays, and I think part of it is to your point, which is the game is so much faster, there's more possessions, there's obviously a ton of games throughout the year, there's a lot of wear and tear on the bodies. A older player might be able to handle that for half the season or 3/4 of the season, or maybe even the full season, but their bodies wear down when it comes to the playoffs, and younger players seem to have a better time with that. Now, we've gone through this era of super teams where people were adding superstar players in free agency and even via trade. But now, to your point, we've gone to Thunder and Pacers. Is this something that you feel like the rest of the league has caught on to and they're fully bought in on? Or do you think that there's still some kind of divide within the front offices of how these teams should be built?
Yeah, there's always going to be ebbs and flows, but I think going forward, the idea of paying so much money to add to your team, whether it's, the Phoenix Suns, right? They get Kevin Durant, they get Devin Booker, and then they add Bradley Beal, who has a no trade clause and over $50 million of salary going to him for the next couple of years. They didn't even make the playoffs. And one of the big reasons why is because the way the new collective bargaining agreement works in today's environment is that it's not just restrictive in terms of luxury tax payments, Joe. It's restrictive in terms of team building. Like, you can't add to your roster with all the tools if you are that deep into the tax. You have your future first round picks frozen. You're not able to add with salary exceptions like other teams are. So I think you're going to see a lot of teams go away from the Phoenix Suns model, what Matt Ishbia had tried to do with Kevin Durant, and go in more in the OKC model, is building through the draft. And they have such a young infusion of talent, really good on defense. And I think you're going to see a lot of teams try to copy this, but Sam Presti, the president of basketball operations for OKC, is well ahead of the game. They have more first-round picks available to them going forward in the next 7 years than any other NBA team. And so even if you try to copy the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're lapping the competition in terms of how to build with youth and draft picks. And they're doing this with a 68-win team, and they might run away with this NBA championship with the most draft artillery in their cupboard.
Yeah, I saw a funny joke. Presti has done such a good job. Someone was saying that if you really wanted parity, you would just make him switch teams every few years because he has really outmaneuvered everyone over the last number of years. But it brings up an interesting point, right? I'm glad you talked about the collective bargaining agreement and the salary cap and some of the penalties that are imposed there, because this is something that has changed over the last number of years. And when leagues do things like this, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But in the NBA's case, it really has created parity. It doesn't always feel like that, but we've had a new NBA champion every year over the last, I think, 7 years. So my question to you is, parity is obviously here, right? Like, I don't think there's any argument against that anymore. But do you think that this is good for the NBA, or do you think that it was better off from a ratings and interest perspective when there were these super teams that were going to championships 2-3 years in a row?
Yeah, Joe, I think there's a real negative externality at play here that I think will backfire potentially with this Oklahoma City Thunder team specifically, because if you want to have these teams really be in front of the national audience and you come to love these players on these teams, well, the way that the collective bargaining agreement is set up is they're trying to break up super teams, but also it doesn't matter if you're acquired via free agency. Jalen Williams, the all-star for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Chet Holmgren are due extensions, max extensions potentially in the next couple years. And for a small market team like Oklahoma City, you might see a really great potential dynasty be broken up unless OKC wants to pay deep into the tax. And I really think the new collective bargaining agreement really erred by not having some incentive for teams to retain, or exceptions for teams to retain players that they drafted. Homegrown talent. This is kind of what we want to see. The Golden State Warriors is a great example of homegrown Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Stephen Curry built through the draft. Well, in this new CBA, it's going to be really cost prohibitive for the Oklahoma City Thunder to keep this team together. It doesn't mean they will break up Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It just means that this new collective bargaining agreement is going to make it really difficult for teams, no matter whether they build through the free agency or in trades, or whether they build it through the draft. It's going to be really hard for them to retain elite talent. And so for me, I would want to see, Joe, if teams draft well and develop their talent, I want to see them be able to retain those players. And unfortunately, if we do see Oklahoma City win the next couple championships and go for a three-peat, it might be that they have to break up this team in ways that the Golden State Warriors were not forced to years ago when they had their dynasty.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because it feels like the rule was established to stop some of those big market, high spending teams from being able to go out and just buy people in free agency. And an effect of that rule, a negative effect, is now that some of the smaller market teams who did it the right way through drafting and trades and things like that are going to be penalized. But I think most people would probably agree with you on that. All right, we've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of my conversation with Tom right after this. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. I'm here with Yahoo Sports contributing writer Tom Haberstroh. I'd love to get your opinion on just where the Paul George trade stands sort of in NBA history at this point, right? I think most people realize that this was a extremely lopsided trade, especially with where the Oklahoma City Thunder are now and where Paul George is too. But where does this trade rank for you in the NBA when it comes to the historically bad trades?
Yeah, it's up there. I mean, remember, Kawhi Leonard wasn't going to come to the Clippers in 2019 unless he got Paul George. And so, yes, Sam Presti had the Clippers over a barrel. knowing that in order for the Clippers to get Kawhi and Paul George in a package deal, they had to give up everything in the cupboard. And so Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 21 years old, coming over in the trade, 5 first-round picks. One of them turns into Jalen Williams, who is an all-star, an all-NBA player for the Thunder this year. It is up there with one of the most lopsided trades of all time. I will also point out that the Indiana Pacers benefited also by trading away Paul George. They got Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo from the Oklahoma City Thunder, also flipping Domantas Sabonis to get their star player Tyrese Halliburton from the Sacramento Kings. So Paul George, he's not going to get a championship ring out of this, but he might as well, because he has been in that butterfly effect, that's 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon. He has, in effect, basically funneled the championship level talent on both sides of this trade. And I will point out also, Sam Presti, this dates back all the way to 2007 when he was with the Sonics. He absorbed Kurt Thomas's contract from the Phoenix Suns, and they gave him 2 first-round picks to do that. First time that a GM had ever done it, a 30-year-old GM in Sam Presti when he was with the Sonics. And that trade actually gave them Serge Ibaka, and Serge Ibaka gave them Domantas Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis gave them Paul George. Paul George gave them Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So 2007, a trade between the Sonics and the Phoenix Suns. Steve Kerr got on the phone with Sam Presti, and that trade, 18 years later, is now creating this NBA Finals between the Thunder and the Pacers.
Everyone watching will now know why I like talking to you so much, because you're like an encyclopedia. I don't think anyone else would have ever thought about that connection from the Sonics to today, but I love it. Tom, are there any other storylines that you're watching in this year's NBA Finals that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I think the American audience really needs to understand that this Oklahoma City team is all-time great. And yes, they could lose this series upcoming, but this is the largest point differential between 2 finals teams since 1971. Like the Thunder were all-time good in the regular season. They didn't have their starting center for half the season. Chet Holmgren missing half the season, Isaiah Hartenstein missing half the season, and still they won 68 games. So this team is going to be great this year and also for the next potentially decade. And so the NBA made a little bit of a mistake by not putting the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Indiana Pacers on Christmas Day this year. None of the 10 teams that were selected were OKC and Indiana, and I do think they'll make up for that next year. These 2 teams are going to be good for a long time. The youngest NBA Finals that we have seen in decades. And I do think that you're going to see a lot more Oklahoma City Thunder going forward because they're stocked in the draft intel and also when it comes to their encore. This is going to be a team we're going to be watching for a very long time, potentially every year in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and they're a fun team to watch. And even though the Pacers may not have been one of the likeliest candidates to get here, Indiana's obviously a big basketball area. So I think that was probably a mistake too. And my guess is, to your point, we'll see them again next year. But Tom, lastly, I want to get your thoughts on Michael Jordan joining as a special contributor for NBC's NBA broadcast next year.
I love it. We need more Michael Jordan on our in front of the American audience. Like when we were talking about people that will watch an NBA game in 2025, a lot of them might not tune in because of Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers, but they might tune in if they know that they can see Michael Jordan. I mean, me growing up watching the 90s Bulls, and a lot of America associates the Bulls with the peak of the NBA. And I think it'll be great for the NBA product as long as he is, I think, championing this era. I think it'll be very interesting to see if Michael Jordan will be speaking highly of today's players, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or whether he will try to boost up the 90s Bulls and his era. But that's, what we'll all be tuning in to see is what kind of commentary he will be bringing. But at the very least, I think more eyeballs on an amazing NBA product will be a good thing for the NBA.
If Michael Jordan starts grading some of these players harshly, it's going to be must-see TV. So I think NBC is quietly hoping that that's what he does. But Tom, thank you so much for joining the show today.
You got it, Joe.
The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. So let's talk about Sha'Carri Richardson's next athletic venture. Last week, Athlos, the all-female track competition founded by Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian, announced that it will be adding a new team-based league in 2026. The announcement also said that Olympic gold medalist and Team USA superstar Sha'Carri Richardson will be joining the Athlos League along with fellow USA teammates Gabby Thomas and Tara Davis Woodhull. And in addition to participating in the new Athlos League, Richardson, Thomas, and Davis Woodhall will be advisor owners and receive an ownership stake in the league's business. Now, Alexis Ohanian first launched Athlos as a standalone women's track event in 2024. Athlos had its first competition at Icon Stadium in New York City with 6 sprint races, as well as a $60,000 prize and a Tiffany crown for the first place winners. However, unlike traditional track events, Athlos features a DJ playing walkout songs for competitors and music in between races to up the entertainment value. Last year's inaugural race also included the concert from Megan Thee Stallion to cap off the event. Athlos said that the first event generated around 3 million viewers, and the organization will hold its second standalone race in October back at Icon Stadium. Now, Ohanian believes Athlos can turn women's track into a mainstream sports product with a season-long schedule, featuring individual prize money for each event and a shared team prize for the end-of-year championship. But the equity component for founding athletes could pay massive dividends for athletes when the organization kicks off its new league in 2026. Athlos joins a growing trend among sports organizations to gain total buy-in from participating athletes by giving them a financial incentive to promote their league and grow its business. Unrivaled, the new 3v3 basketball league gave equity in the league to its founding players and generated over $27 million in revenue in its successful debut season. Now, Athlos is hoping it can jumpstart its own league through a shared athlete ownership model, and locking in a superstar like Sha'Carri Richardson is a great start. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Tom, and for all of you for joining us. Please make sure to scan the QR code below to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights, and catch us every Thursday wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.